Hey guys, my name's Kyla, and I'm your host of That Christian Girl podcast, a podcast that's devoted to helping Christians of all walks of life be inspired and encouraged to reach their full godly potential. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you enjoy. Hey guys, it's Kyla, and I'm so excited for today's episode. Today, I had the great chance to interview a sister in Christ. Her name is Nia, and she's from Kenya, and she has her own podcast as well. And this has been kind of months in the making, this whole podcast idea. So she reached out to me, and we just kind of did a little podcast flip. So today we're going to be talking all about confidence and how to share and really run after God-sized goals as teenagers, because I wanted to talk really to Nia about her experiences and just how life is for her as a really young girl chasing those God-sized goals. So I hope you enjoy today's episode, and yeah, let's get into it. Hey guys, it's Kyla, and I'm here with Nia. Nia, how about you say hi and tell us just a few fun facts about yourself?
Hello, Kyla's podcast. Hello, That Christian Girl fans. I am Nia. I really don't like crisps or chips, like whatever you want to call them. I hate them, and I find them to be like the grossest things in the entire world. And I know this is random, but I'm so passionate about this. Like, they disturb me on levels that Disturb does not know. Because when I was younger, I was like made to eat them a lot. So now I hate crisps. But yeah, that's very random.
What?
Yep.
I have never met somebody who hates chips. That's kind of really funny. Yeah, we
It's
call it
so.
chips here.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so Nia has her own podcast, and it's called the Keep It Clean podcast. And I know you already heard this probably in the intro, but I'm so excited to be here with her. Yeah, and she lives in Kenya, so is there anything like super different about Kenya than like the US that you would say, or is it about the same?
I definitely think that some of Kenya's issues aren't as well, from what I'm told by like my friends in the US, they're not as bad as America's issues and stuff. A, and then B, we're not as, like, no offense to us Kenyans, but we're not as advanced, shall I say. Like, the way I'd be watching a vlog and they're like a bunch of malls and a bunch of shops in like one specific area. Kenya doesn't have too many malls. Don't picture it like how BBC shows it, because we have a bunch of malls, but not like many malls and stuff. And we only have like what, maybe 5 major malls. We have other ones, but they're not really like big. Oh, and clothes in Kenya are not the best thing to find. So I think that's all that's different about Kenya compared to America. And podcasts, especially, it's very rare to find a podcaster in Kenya. It's something that doesn't happen often.
Yeah, I feel like it's so different yet so similar. And it was so great that Nia and I could meet. Do you want to tell the story? Because we're doing like a collaborative episode. So she made me tell the story, but now I have to make her tell the story.
I would love to. Okay, so I was scrolling through Spotify and I saw the way like on Spotify you have recommended podcasts because I like listening to some. It showed Kyla's podcast and I was like, let me tap on this. So I'm listening because I listened to her very first episode. The intro where she was kind of just giving her testimony and talking about what inspired her to like start the podcast. So I listened to the very first episode and I was like, this is so good. And then I got the very random urge, to be honest, because this doesn't happen often, to kind of just message her. So I was like, okay. So I pulled up Instagram and I looked for the podcasts, for Kyla's podcast's Instagram, and I DM'd her. So that's how we met.
Yeah, I remember getting that DM and I just remember being like so happy because I love it when people DM me and like, hey, I listened to this episode and I loved it. Makes me so happy. So I am so glad that she reached out, and yeah, Okay, so today we're going to do an episode about chasing God-sized goals. So
Mm,
this is with Nia. She has had her podcast, I think, for a few years now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Um, and she has been chasing this God-sized goal for I don't know how long. So I just wanted to ask her some questions on how how she's going about chasing this God-sized goal, and then also how she came to the idea of the podcast and how her age has really impacted the podcast as well. Okay. So, my first question for you is could you talk about how you came to the idea of your podcast?
okay, so the whole idea of the podcast and like the podcast name is so unique. Like my mom jokes that it was like straight from heaven because I think I had just joined this leadership program. And one of the assignments we had was to make a podcast. It didn't even have to be posted. And it wasn't mandatory to have any podcast art. It wasn't mandatory to write a script. All you literally had to do was like film an audio and like send it to them. But then I don't know why. I just started filming and I'm like, I feel like I should do this the best way possible. So I did the script writing and the filming and the recording and all that stuff. And then I made the podcast artwork and published it on Spotify. And then 3 episodes later, I'm like, I want to keep going even though the assignment is over. So 2 years later, we are here, listening to the podcast, and it's something that I genuinely enjoy doing, and it's no longer for an assignment.
Yeah, I think it was so great that assignment enabled you to really create something so cool. And I've been listening to Nia's episodes, and they're all so great. And
Thank you.
I've seen, because I started with her first few podcasts, and then now I've been listening to her more recent podcast, and I've just seen the growth. So it's just amazing seeing that.
Thank you so much, Kyla. And I'm really glad that Kyla and I were able to start talking because it's definitely amazing to know someone who kind of has a podcast and you're able to relate on that specific aspect. Like the other day, we were talking about how we both use the same editing software, and it was so cool.
Yeah, it's just so funny how many things can like really connect us, even if we feel very different, because Nia lives in
Yeah.
Kenya. So that's so different than the US, but
Mm,
and it's so far away, but it's really cool to see how we can connect on so many levels between our podcasts and our faith and just other things. So yeah, I'm really glad how God uses
yay.
these kinds of things.
I completely agree. It's miraculous.
Okay. So you said it started with a school assignment, and I kind of already know your story, but
Hmm.
you really started to shift more into adding more Christianity into your podcast. And I just wanted to ask you, what made you decide to add more Christianity and share more of your faith in your podcast?
Hmm. To be honest, I feel like I became more confident about sharing my faith when I became closer to God. Because in the first episodes, I don't know whether it's not really visible too much or audible too much, but you can't really tell that I'm a Christian. But then as the episodes kind of progress, that's when, because the podcast started in 2021. Yes, in 2021. And it was crazy because 2021 November, yeah, 2021 November. It was crazy because in 2021 I wasn't really like looking to expand my faith or grow my faith, and then I started sharing more Christian content in 2022 when I was practically talking to God for hours on end on a daily. So I definitely think that kind of hunger to get to know God more and to learn why He created me influenced how much I preach and minister on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that was such a good point because I feel like once we really start to have more of a relationship with God and with Jesus is when we want to
Mhm.
share him more
Yeah.
because yeah, I think it's just a great way to remember to share him, and because you're hungering after him, you want to share him more.
Yeah, because it's as God reveals like his amazingness and his perfectness and omnipotence. Is that the word for it to you? You're kind of like, I want
Omnipresence, I think.
omnipresence. That's a word.
Yeah.
So, as he like reveals all that to you, you're kind of like, I want to show everyone this. I want everyone to know how much they're loved, you know?
Yeah, I think that's so great. Um, the episode that I just recorded,
Hmm.
what was it on? Oh yeah, it was on like getting out of your comfort zone. And I think that's one of the things that really helps you get out of that comfort zone and um, really break through and share your faith more is
Yeah.
like seeing how it's worked in your life. And you just want to share it with everyone because you're like, I
Hmm.
want everybody to have this.
Definitely.
Okay, so my next question for you is, did you have any inspirations or inspiring people that inspired you to start your podcast or start sharing more in your podcast?
Hmm. To be honest, I think it was definitely for a very long time. Not many people knew about the podcast. It's only very recently when I kind of relaunched, shall I say, the podcast that now my friends even know I have a podcast. For the first 1.5 years, it was purely very few family members knew, maybe two or three. Um, so there definitely like wasn't much. But I remember one person for sure, my aunt. She gave me the entire podcast name, and I don't think she realized it, because I remember it very clearly. August 9th, 2021. I was coming down the stairs and my auntie was telling me, okay, well, I'm just gonna give you guys like a bit of a backstory. I couldn't come up with an episode name to save my life, a podcast name to save my life. And I asked her, and she was like, well, I don't really know, though I'm really glad you've been keeping your room clean lately. And I was like, keep it clean. There's a name. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good story. I kind of like that. Um, did you have any like inspiring people that helped, or like people that helped you on the way with your podcast though? Like I know your mom is very supportive and
Yeah.
she is a Christian as well, but you
Hmm.
always talk so highly of her and she seems like such a great person and such a supportive person. Did she help inspire you, or what were some ways that she helped you like really grow in this podcast and in your faith?
Um, I mean, I love both my parents, but out of the two of them, I would definitely 100% say that mom has always been supporting the podcast, like from the beginning. I remember the night before I was supposed to have my first podcast call, I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, I have no idea how I'll do this. I'm completely messing up. This isn't gonna work. It's gonna be so bad. And she was like, breathe. And we went over the complete script and she acted like my guest and I acted like the host. And then the next day, the podcast came out and it was a great podcast. And I know that like without her, that podcast wouldn't even have come out. And then I remember, I think this was more recent when I was kind of rebranding the podcast, sorry. I changed what's it called? The podcast artwork. So I changed that up,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom really helped me with that because yes, I'm pretty good with Canva, but I had the colors a bit off, so she helped me with that.
Yeah, that's so good. I think it's so helpful to have either a supportive person or a person inspiring you when you're
Hmm.
trying to chase those God-sized goals. Like I definitely talk about my inspirations, like the people that I see
It
on
definitely
Instagram.
helps.
Yeah, so there was this one podcast called The Christian Girl Tea, and I need to
Hmm.
listen more because I haven't actually listened to it in a while. But I remember I was struggling with all like, how do I do this? And I remember seeing her, and she's young, she's a teenager, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, she's a teenager, and she's doing
Hmm.
this, and she's been doing this for a while. Like, that's
Hmm.
amazing. And that really helped inspire me to start and made me realize, like, hey, you can do this even though you're young,
Yeah.
you're not like discounted for your youth. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more later.
Yeah, definitely. I listened to the Christian Girls Tea also. I think I started listening to it when it was like much younger. It didn't have the same podcast artwork it has now. I think I joined because she created a group for freshman girls, freshman, senior, and college. She has like the different stages of high school. She has a group for each. So yeah, and I think I'm in her group for the freshman girls, and that was definitely so interesting because part of chasing God-sized goals is having that community that is able to support you doing that, like while you're chasing that God-sized goal. And she helped me really chase that God-sized goal by creating that space for me to be like, hey, so we're both at like the same age and we both have a couple common values, many common values, and could we like talk about this and see how we can like achieve these goals the best way we can, you know?
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about like inspirations and how that helps you chase your God-sized goal?
I definitely believe that someone who inspired me, and I just realized it now, was kind of, I think our pastor at the time had a podcast, and he'd always really encouraged me to keep uploading, and I was really grateful for that because were it not for not only him, but kind of the people I surround myself with now, because some people will DM me from the podcast, and I really like that because it kind of keeps me going. And I think they inspire me in a way. And definitely, I have people, because I'm always saying this on the podcast, the episodes are inspired by day to day activities that just, oh, that's something I could like podcast about. I remember there's an episode I had on being productive, and the episode was fully because I saw my mom being extremely productive from kind of not being as productive in 1 week, and she was so productive, and I was like, oh my lord, I have to do an episode on that and ask her how she did that. So I definitely think the people around me inspired me so much more than social media, I guess, because then I didn't really have social media too much.
Yeah, I think that's like such a good point. Is just finding inspiration in your day-to-day things. I feel like I
Exactly.
kind of find inspiration for my episodes in that as well.
Yeah.
I I have a lot like planned out for once school starts, but before that, I'm just like everything kind of right now, just
Yeah.
doing whatever.
I think that's
Okay,
really cool. Hmm.
yeah. Oh, well, I was gonna go to my next question. If you're ready to move on.
Oh, yes, yes, I am.
Okay, so my number four question was, what are some struggles you've had since starting this podcast?
Struggles, consistency. That is number one. Like in bold, in capital, in italics, consistency. Because the thing about a podcast is that for it to grow, you have to be consistent, like every single week. And that's something that definitely disturbed me for a really long time. Maybe for the first 1.5 years of having the podcast, it really like messed me up because I didn't have a consistent uploading schedule, and a day I'd be like, oh yeah, this is when the podcast comes out. Consistency and being part of the podcast, those are two things I really struggled with. What did you struggle with though? I know this is like your interview, though I'd really like to kind of ask you that, if that's fine with you.
Yeah, of course. I think I would second the consistency part
Mm.
because, yeah, I'm trying to do podcast episodes every Tuesday and Friday, and that doesn't
Hmm.
really work out all the time.
Yeah.
So, definitely being consistent, especially with like one of the two, is really hard for me. And then just like time to edit and
Mm.
time to record. That's been one of my struggles is having that enough time to do that.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah, and then I had one more struggle, I guess. So I had this one girl, who I know, who we had like, who I had a falling out of. I think I've mentioned her just briefly in my podcast a few times, but
Yeah.
she reached out to me and like there was a good solid week. It was the week that I took off from the podcast
Hmm.
because I was so scared to do anymore. I think I was just struggling with, oh, she knows about it. She could be listening to it. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, I'm so scared. Like
Hmm.
that fear. So that's
Yeah.
definitely been one of my struggles. Oh, and then
I
I really look up
mhm.
to you how you
Oh,
share your
thank you.
podcast on your personal account. Um, because I definitely struggle with that. Is sharing it on my personal account with all of the unbelievers that I have following me. Probably about
Yeah,
90% of my followers are unbelievers, which is a great way to like share my faith, but then also it's scary to get that backlash from people sometimes. You're like worried that they're
yeah,
gonna DM you all angry and be like, oh, well, I don't believe in this. Like, go away. Like, why would you share
mm,
this? Or whatever.
true.
So that's been hard.
I will say that I wanted to mention this a bit earlier. So I really, really love how you kind of do your podcast. And when you got into doing the podcast, you didn't just do it like one toe in. You kind of like went in the full mile. Because I see you sometimes like you'll post on the That Christian Girl podcast Instagram, and you'll do the reels and you'll do the stories, and you're really like fully dedicated to it. And I think that's definitely something I'm inspired by, and I really want to be more like you when it comes to posting and the consistency aspect.
Yeah, I'm definitely struggling with the social media part right now just because
Mhm.
I'm so busy with work and everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, well, thank you. I forgot to say thank you, so thank you for that. Yeah, I think consistency just seems like something that both of us struggle with, and I think really
Yeah,
anybody would.
that's so it's consistency is one of the most I don't know, like groundbreaking thing, especially when it comes to kind of social media, when it comes to podcasting. It's something that will either make or break your podcast.
Yeah, there's just so much that I feel like you have to do for a podcast. It's
Mm,
insane
mm-hmm.
because you're like, well, you want your podcast to grow, and
Yeah,
it's easy to just post. It's not easy to just post a podcast episode, but it's much easier to just post a podcast episode and not even have an Instagram for it. So
yeah,
trying to like really growing the podcast is a lot harder than just starting a podcast and uploading like 30-minute episodes every week. But once you throw in like the social media aspect
mm,
and once you try and be committed to growing the podcast, that's when it gets kind of
yeah.
hard, I found.
Because I think my problem at first was that I'd be so mad, like, why aren't I seeing growth? Or the growth would be like so small for the first year. But it didn't have a social media account, like the podcast. So now that I post on social media, definitely like the growth I feel went from 5% to like 100 and something percent. Because when it comes to chasing a God-sized goal, you can't just dip your toe into the water, you know? Either you're in or you're out. You can't be halfway through, otherwise the God-sized goal won't go to be God-sized, you know?
Yeah, that's like such a good analogy. That's the word, analogy, is you have to go full in, not just dip a toe in. I really like that. That's like so good. I'm gonna have to remember that. Yeah, I would say that growth is really hard with the podcast. And I even remember when I was trying to plan my podcast, I saw
Mm-hmm.
this thing online. I was watching a bunch of YouTube videos and stuff to figure it out. And this one girl was like, yeah, so you're not going to see much growth. It's probably going to take really a year for it to really grow. And that
Mm,
year made me so scared because I was like, what if I can't stay consistent? You know, because I
mm,
struggle with being consistent in a lot of stuff. So,
yeah.
yeah, the growth aspect is hard, but having those people that DM you, like you were saying,
Mm.
or just cheer you along is so good.
It really like makes life much easier, shall I say? Because it's kind of like I call those people kisses from heaven. Because there are times when I've been like, I don't want to record an episode. I really don't. And then someone just like DMs me or texts me saying, "Oh yeah, this podcast really helped me. I can't wait for the one coming out on like Monday and stuff." So I'm like, you know what? Let me put this episode out. If not for um if not for the clout and everything, I think it would be for this one person who has just really helped me kind of get through this, you know? Because,
Mm-hmm.
not gonna lie, I mean, yes. Oh, were you about to say something?
No, I was just agreeing.
Oh, because, yes, I think I'm not gonna necessarily speak for you because I don't know whether you're like this, but I love podcasting, but that doesn't mean I always want to do it, you know?
Yes, I understand that. Once it comes to Monday night and I've put off a new podcast episode for so long,
Hmm.
I'm like, do I really want to record it? It's like 9:30 at night. I'll be up
Yeah.
so late. Like that's something that I struggle with is
Hmm.
really wanting to do that and put out new episodes sometimes. So yeah, like your DM when you DM me, oh, I can't wait for the night routine episode, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh no, it's not coming out today. I'm so sorry, just because I didn't have the motivation to do it the day before. But
Hmm.
that really helped, like me feel motivated to do it still.
Thank you. I'm really glad that it helped you because, to be honest, every Tuesday and Friday I'm really excited to kind of listen to your episodes. Like I just before we started this call, I was listening to the last episode. Was it episode 12? Getting
Yep.
comfortable with the uncomfortable. That really hit
Yeah.
me. I was like, what the
Really?
wow.
Well, it's so amazing seeing how much this podcast has like grown my faith, and I probably think that you can attest to that too. Just
Mm,
the amount of growth in our faith that we see while we're really trying to chase the God-sized goal. You have to grow in your faith to be able to chase the God-sized goal, and you are growing in your faith every time you chase it.
definitely. It's not I think one of the reason God sometimes gives us that God-sized goal is because he knows immediately you start chasing that goal, you're either hanging on to me or you're down. So it
Yeah.
kind of forces us to cling on to God and be like, Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm listening to you and I'm taking the next step. I can't see the entire path, but I'm gonna take this next step by faith. And yeah,
Yeah, I think that's so good. Just really how much we have to trust him to be able to
exactly.
chase the God-sized goal.
It's definitely not like an easy thing, because, um, oh, okay. There's this quote I heard. God doesn't appoint the anointed, he anoints the appointed, I think. So
Yes, I
it
think
was
I
something
said
like that.
that.
Yeah,
I think I said that in yours, and I was struggling with
exactly.
remembering what it was. But
Hmm.
yeah, I love that quote where it's like he doesn't call the people that like have it all figured out and have all of these what's the word specifications,
Hmm.
whatever, that make them look like the perfect person. He calls the people that he knows that he can work in, and who he will be glorified for that work in them. Um,
Yeah,
and really just shows how like he is working and how much he can work through you.
definitely. I think it sometimes as Christians we kind of think God can only use me from a certain way when that's not true. God will use literally anyone. And I think the Bible, especially the New Testament, can attest to that, where it's like, oh, God, you're using him? Didn't he kill
Yeah,
someone? Didn't he
exactly.
do this? Didn't he do this? But you realize God's like, no, I'm not like I'm not condemning him because of his sins.
Yeah, like Paul, he was
Exactly.
he
Hmm.
was killing Christians, and God used him of all people to become one of the most important, is it apostles? Yeah,
Hmm.
apostles in the New Testament. At least I think he's one of the most important because he's written so many books, and his books are
Hmm.
always what I turn to.
Hmm.
That's what I always like reading.
So I think um what God tends to do, which I think some of us can, I don't know, some of us can be like, oh, really? Is that he will pick the people he knows will glorify him the most to the fullest like extent, or he'll pick the people that he knows he will work in, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think if he picks some of the people that, maybe one person would be like, why would you pick them? They're
Yeah.
so evil and they're so bad and they're so
Hmm.
unchristian like or whatever. But he picks
Hmm.
them because you can really see how he works in them and works through them. Like, it's amazing to see how much
Exactly.
he can do and how much he can be glorified for that work.
There's this I think was it like a TikTok slash Instagram Reels trend where it was like the enemy thought he had me, but Jesus said you are mine, and people were sharing
Yes.
their stories. And there's this pastor who was saying that he used to be a drag queen, and then he came to church, and the Lord saved him from that kind of area in his life that he was struggling in. And now he's really content in his gender, and he has a wife and 3 kids, and he's living a happy life. And I was like, oh my God. And he preaches in Sunday because he's a pastor. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's so cool to see how much God can work in every single person's life. It's like
Mm.
awe-inspiring moment.
Definitely. I think also sometimes, as young Christians especially, we can get very persecuted for our faith more than those who are older. Well, I'm just speaking from personal experience because,
Hmm.
like, in the podcast and stuff, I think there definitely sometimes people are like, what do you know about this? You're only this many years old. So, I don't know. I definitely believe that you have to be, whenever God like calls you to chase this God-sized goal, you have to understand that God isn't looking at your age.
Yeah, exactly. You just
Hmm.
led into literally my next question, which I was gonna try and lead into, but you did
Hmm.
it so perfectly.
Oh, thank
So
you.
I just wanted to talk about, like, my fifth question was how, because we're both young girls, you're 13,
Hmm.
I'm almost 17, so I guess
Hmm.
I,
Yay.
I almost said I'm 15. I don't know where that came from, but I was gonna
Hmm.
say, how has your age enabled or quote unquote disabled you and your
Ah,
podcast?
oh, okay. Then that was a very, very interesting way to kind of get into the question. But
Well,
age
you did it so
enabled?
perfectly because you were
Thank
like
you.
talking about how age, how God can use us no matter what age. So we can just expand on that point a little bit more because I wanted to talk about that.
Okay, so age enabled. I think it's enabled it because definitely I'm always talking about this on my podcast where it's you know what, I don't like calling the podcast my podcast because I think it's not only my podcast but it's also it's mostly God's podcast because sometimes I'm talking and I'm like, Lord, you spoke through me in that one. I couldn't have said that by myself. But I think it's definitely enabled me in that the whole childlike faith thing. I'm always talking about childlike faith on the podcast because I think also homeschooling has enabled the podcast, which has enabled my faith, and so I definitely believe that my age has enabled the podcast because I'm younger, I guess, so I don't really have to stress too much about, oh, I have to pay for insurance, or I have to pay for this, or I have to go to work this early in the morning. I mean, yes, definitely I am thinking of starting a business, but it's not going to be the whole, I'm really stressed about this, and I'm really grateful God has used me as young as I am because now it means that I'm able to devote more time into getting to know who He is and how He wants me to kind of make this podcast into a vessel that will grow people closer to Him. Disabled? Um, I think I've definitely had some hate. Yeah, a lot of hate because of my age, and it used to disturb me a lot. But then I think as time went by and I started praying, Lord, this is your tool, you know? And it's not like as Christians, one thing is for sure, we will be persecuted. So,
Yeah, exactly.
oh, and then the verse, pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. That was a very hard verse for me to get. But then when I did, it definitely helped the podcast.
Hmm. I think the age thing about how some people talk badly about you because of your age or look down to you because of your age, can really
Mm-hmm.
combat it with, is it First Timothy or Second Timothy? It's like, let no one despise you because of your age.
Yes, yes, I love that verse. Because the version that you says, let no one look down on you because of your age. But
Yeah.
I really love that verse.
Yes, First Timothy 4:12, just found it. Let no man
Mm-hmm.
despise. Wow, this is like an old version. Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word and conversation, in charity and spirit and faith and purity.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like King James version or something with the way that they said
Mm-hmm.
thy and thou. But yeah, I love
Mm-hmm.
that verse, and I think that verse is so encouraging, especially when you're young and it's scary and you're like, should I be doing this? Oh, what's the
Yeah.
word? Am I qualified for this?
Qualified, yeah.
But it's crazy to think. I know my pastor always stresses at our youth group how God uses the young people, and how a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that God uses are young, or maybe in their early 20s or even younger, like some teenagers. He's used so many young people to really help further his word.
Mm-hmm. I think that right now there's kinda I think there's a really large movement. I'm even seeing it in my friends a lot, where God is using young people, and it's so beautiful. Because now it feels like it's going from, oh, I'm praying because my parents are praying, into I am praying because I know that without God I wouldn't be where I am today. So definitely the way God is using people that are our age, like teenagers, is absolutely beautiful, and only God could do that, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like it's so cool how even social media has enabled so many young people to really be on fire and really share their faith. Like, it's so
Mm-hmm.
amazing to see how, we who are living in the time of social media and living in that time where there's a lot of influencers and people are trying to be influencers and making TikTok videos, all of that stuff, but how maybe if an adult had made TikTok videos like faith-based, people would be like, okay, or like people our age would be like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but how people our age, we connect because we're the same age or around the same age, and how he can just really use social media and the influencers to really help share him with a really big audience, because a lot of influencers are young.
Mm-hmm. And like what I love about the verse you also just mentioned, was it First Timothy 4,
12. Yeah.
4:12? I really,
Mm-hmm.
really love that verse because um I think for a really long time that was kind of my life story, because especially I think it's for the both of us, to be honest. We both have a podcast and we both use it so much like as a ministry tool, and then there are people out there like you said who will shame it, and they're like, why are you so young and you have that podcast? But then social media has really, really helped us because it's allowing us to engage with people who are like-minded and are also really seeking to love God and to get to know God more. So I think it's enabled both our faith, it has enabled the ministry that's going on, and it's also enabled our podcast, which is contributing to the ministry.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so cool how we can use something that, we grew up around, and something that we are quote unquote good at that maybe
Mm-hmm.
somebody older might not be good at, like making videos and sharing stuff on social media, and how we're able
Yeah.
to use that to really further our Christianity and further our faith and really share. And yeah.
Mm. I'm just gonna read like 15 to 16 because I opened up the verse you were saying, First
Oh,
Timothy
yeah.
4, because it's so I really, really like this verse, but let me start. I'll skip just the first sentence because it's like finishing up the sentence before, but it's First Timothy 15 to 16. I'm reading Message, by the way. Immerse yourself in them. The people will all see you as mature right before their eyes. Keep a firm grasp on both your character and your teaching. Don't be diverted, just keep at it. Especially the just keep at it part is something I've had to keep reminding myself because this was my devotional for a whole 2 months, First Timothy. And I think it really helped me because it's kind of like, Lord, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I don't know whether it was Ashley Hetherington or it was another Christian TikToker who was saying, just take the next step, you know? When it comes to knowing God, it says that he's a light unto my path. Yeah, the Lord is a light unto my path. He won't he won't always show you your like whole path from start to finish. Normally, he'll just light the path around you and you have to
Yeah,
take
exactly.
a couple steps and then by faith, he'll keep like lighting the path in front of you. So it's one step at a time.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I can't add any to it. Those two verses are so good.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read through First Timothy, but maybe I have to now. Because 15 and 16 are also really good verses.
They are. So,
Okay,
yeah, they really are.
so I'm going to go to my next question. Because, So, my next question is, how do you recommend a person starts toward their God-sized goals?
I think the first thing I'd tell you to do is every good and perfect gift is from the Lord. I love quoting verses, but every good and perfect gift is from the Lord. So what I'd say is when God tells you you're supposed to chase a God-sized goal, he's let it out into the world, meaning that the enemy has heard it too. So from now on, he's going to be working to make sure you don't chase that goal. So what I'd recommend is first, get into prayer and be very prayerful about how you go about that God-sized goal. Otherwise, you'll get yourself in a place where you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't know what to do, and you're kind of just letting the enemy win. So I think definitely the first thing you should do is, yes, God has told you this is your God-sized goal. Now go to him because it is God-sized and only a God could help with God-sized goal, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I can second that because definitely I felt kind of called to do this podcast. And then there was, I don't know, I think the day or 2 days after where I was like, oh no, I can't do this. And all the doubts came. And I think
Mm,
that was like such a good thing that you said that once it's out in the open and God has made his plans known for you, the devils
yeah.
will start trying to attack it. So I thought that was so good because I definitely struggled with that. Struggled with the I'm not good enough for this, you know?
Mm. I completely relate in that aspect because I remember when I started the podcast and okay, I say when I started the podcast, but when I started doing it as more than an assignment, I was so afraid. I was constantly afraid. I would make sure none of my friends knew about the podcast because I didn't want them to think it was weird or anything. None of my teachers knew about it besides that one teacher. Um, my parents knew, maybe one family member knew, 1 to 3 maybe, and that was
Mm-hmm.
about it. I really didn't want anyone to know because I was that scared, and I think um that fear kind of stopped me from achieving God's perfect plan for me in that season of my life.
Yeah, I think like this is kind of just going into my last podcast episode, I feel like, with
Mm-hmm.
the getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. But
Mm,
I definitely say prayer is definitely a thing that you should be doing. And then also trying to talk to others. Like, I remember I
yeah,
brought it up to my mom and she was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I think like her reaction just really gave me more hope. I was like, "Oh, this is good." Anyways, I think her reaction to that was really good and really encouraging.
I think when it comes to chasing a God-sized goal, I definitely agree with what you said. Like, tell someone you trust about it, but also don't tell everyone, you know?
Mhm.
I'd recommend you say tell 1 or 2 people, but not everyone is for you. And my mom is always telling me that, meaning there's some times God tells you something, especially with God-sized goals, because they're God-sized, you bring them to God, you ask a couple people whom you very much trust and you know they're rooting for you to help you like pray through it, but you don't go around the street telling every person, because some people aren't for you. So they'll start declaring things over your life that God hadn't declared. And of course, the power of the tongue, and then they'll start rooting so that like you don't achieve the goal that God had set for you.
Yeah. It's so hard to have those like little voices in your head who are like,
Yeah.
we don't like this, we don't like you, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And really does not help you have confidence.
Exactly. And I think what a couple of episodes ago was this? Yeah. The episode before last, I was talking about becoming confident, and I remember saying that my confidence, truly I can say this completely, is from the Lord, because I can't say it's from my parents or it's because of maybe like a bunch of other stuff, but it is fully 100% from the Lord. And when it comes to those small little voices that really do nothing for you, I think it kind of comes down to just being like, Lord, I need your help.
Yeah, exactly. I think not listening to those voices in your head, or even those voices that other people might say, is really important. And only telling the people that you trust, especially in the planning period when it's not actually a thing yet.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go into the final question, which I think is a great way to end the podcast, which are, what are the big things you've learned or big ways you've seen yourself and your faith grow? That's kind of like two questions in one. So let's just start with, what are the big things you've learned?
The big things I've learned is that God is so amazing, and immediately you start. No, wait. I think I have so many things I've learned, and I'm kind of trying to summarize them so it's not like a full 15-minute thing. Though I would say, summarizing it, when God tells you to do something, He already knows how you'll do it. And He has provided you with the resources to do it. So when God tells you to do something, most of the time, He already knows, He already has given you the resources you need to do it. So I think that's definitely the first thing I've learned. And then the next thing is consistency is key. 100%. Like that's so, I wish I learned this when I was younger. So I think that's all I've learned.
I think, I don't know. I can't really add any more to that. I think consistency is key, definitely, in chasing big God-sized goals and really keeping at it, keeping in prayer and all of that stuff. Okay, and then final question, what are the big ways you've seen yourself and your faith grow?
I have seen my faith grow, especially like when you were saying you're listening to the older podcasts and then the newer ones. I've been doing that a bit more often too. So I'd listen to kind of the older episodes where I would very, very, very rarely talk about God. I'd say my mom is reading the Bible or something like that. And then now it's kind of like I'm having entire episodes on how to grow closer to God as a teenager and growing closer to God and how to kind of stop procrastinating from a Christian perspective. And I just spoiled what the day after tomorrow's episode is supposed to be about. But you know what? It's fine. So, so I think God has definitely.
Hey, good thing for me, now I know.
Oh, yay. Though I think the biggest way is just realizing that I think it was when we were calling, the first time we ever called, and you said that our podcasts are ministry tools, and it really hit me. Like I'd never thought about it like that.
Yeah, I think I've just seen my faith grow so much with my podcast and just really trying to, I don't know, really try and live like Jesus. Like, what would Jesus do? Yeah. Trying to make an active step towards that when maybe earlier I wouldn't care so much about it, but now I do. I care a lot about it.
I remember, was it the 29-day challenge for reading your Bible every day?
Mm-hmm.
I remember I'd
28
like
day, I
see
think.
you, 28-day challenge. When I'd see you like reading your Bible every day, I really was kind of awed by that, by AWED. But yeah, I found that to be so, so beautiful because I've I'm not gonna lie, I've been struggling to read my Bible. I do devotion a lot, I do prayer a lot, and then I'm like, will I read my Bible? You know? So I definitely think
Mm-hmm.
that the 28-day challenge is something I tried. I did 7 days and then I was like, oh, I kind of messed up. And then I tried to go back and then I messed up again. But I think the 28-day challenge definitely kind of also helped me grow my faith.
Yeah, I feel like I need to do that again because definitely consistency has not gone downhill, but well, yes, it has gone downhill for me. But
Mhm.
I think I've just seen so much growth in, I don't know, how I speak maybe, but how I think as well, and thinking
Yeah.
like, no, Kyla, that's ungodly and
Mm.
that's sin. When I think something, maybe when I wouldn't think that, I
Yeah.
don't know, 7 months prior, 8 months prior.
I completely relate to that because I think there's a time I something I would like normally post in my story, I posted it and I got conviction about it and I just like deleted it immediately before anyone saw it. And I was like, and I really didn't understand because I was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with the story. And then I went back and I started praying and I was like, Lord, thank you so much for opening my eyes because it was a meme I'd seen on Instagram. And I think it was about, see the submarine that sank? I'd put that on my story. And
Mm.
it was like, see that there's like the jokes, the kind of funny ones, and then there's like the really mean jokes. And I kind of thought that to be funny, and it's only once like I got the conviction and I deleted it immediately that I was like, Lord Jesus, thank you so much for saving me from that. So definitely I relate on that because the podcast really helps, especially with speech also.
Yeah, exactly. I think you feel not even just like putting up an act to pretend like you're the perfect Christian, but also just trying to
Mm,
live that out. Maybe not being the perfect Christian, but living more like Jesus, especially with the podcast. It's like,
yeah.
well, I can't be preaching something and then be doing something different. Like, you have to practice what you preach. I remember
Mm,
my mom telling me that when I was going to summer camp, and I was really dreading it. She's like, Kyla, you have to practice what you preach. You gotta go to
yeah.
this and get out of your comfort zone and keep a positive mindset. And if you don't, you have to practice what you preach.
Yeah.
So it just that really convicted me to really try and have an open mind and get out of my comfort zone and
Mm.
really be open to it and practice what I was preaching, practice what I was saying.
That's really beautiful. Let me ask though, how did summer camp go? I don't remember asking you last time.
Oh, it was so good. It ended up being probably the most fun weekend of my life. As I said in
Mm,
my uncomfortable, like getting out of your comfort zone episode,
mhm.
because I think I didn't really even realize how much I needed that interaction with other girls and even guys my age.
Yeah.
Um, it was just so good to get away and not have to worry about work and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, it turned out really good. Even though I was really scared to go and I didn't want to go,
Mm,
now I made a new friend and I'm like, I just feel so blessed and it's so good because
mm.
we've been trying to hang out. We're gonna go to a rodeo tonight, so that should be really fun. And yeah,
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, God, you really worked through that. And I'm
Hmm.
sorry that I was mad and I was worried and I didn't want to do this.
Yeah. I remember seeing on Ashley Hetherington's story when it was like kind of is it called like a stop, not the stop sign, the like stop and go thing, the red the lights. What are they called?
Oh, stoplight. Maybe?
Mm, yeah. I think that we call them something different. But yeah, so the stoplights, when she'd be like, "This is me when God tells me to wait," and she's like pressing the go, go, go button like a lot. And it was very interesting because sometimes God is like, "Nope, it's time for you to go to this place because you're gonna make a good friend that will kind of grow your faith and get you to be a happier person." When you're like, "No, I don't want to go," and you're not thinking of how God can use that circumstance. And I think that's definitely something that us Christians, need to kind of work on, because I struggle with that too, where it's like, I really do want to do this. I really do want to do this. And I'm not thinking at all of how God can use a situation.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the things that I've learned with the podcast is really giving it to God and letting him, like, oh, what is it called? Handle every single situation. And yeah.
That's really...
Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I say that's really beautiful a lot, and I realize that when I'm like editing episodes. So, yeah.
I love it though. It's so cute. You said I noticed it when we were talking, and I was like, "Oh, I love how you say that." Because
Oh,
it is
thank
really
you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay.
You say
Oh, what do I say?
You tend to say and and yeah. You say like and yeah a lot, and it's really sweet. Oh, and then when we're on call, I think you kept doing the thing with your hand that I was telling you I do the same, where when you're laughing you like cover your nose and your mouth.
Oh, yep. Yep, I do that. And yes, I say yeah and wait, what? I say yeah, but you could see I can tell when I'm trying to think when I'm trying to edit my podcast episodes. I can tell.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's when I was trying to think of what to say. Just how I say the word. The connector word. Okay, well, it was so amazing having you on here, and I'm so glad that I got this chance to talk to you. It was such a blessing, and you guys, make sure to go check out the Keep It Clean podcast. You will not be disappointed, I promise you. And yeah, we are gonna I did a interview on her episode 2, so make sure to go check that out. It's gonna come out the same day, and thank you so much for listening. And thank you for being here, Nia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I loved this experience because I'm kind of used to hosting, and this was like, it was really cool because it's kind of like doing a full 360 to being a guest, and I was very, very grateful to have an amazing host like you and to be featured on your amazing podcast.
Yes, and such a good experience for me too. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, thanks for coming on and talking and being willing to share.
Thank you so much. I really, really did enjoy it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks so much for making it all the way to the end. It was such a good experience, and I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode as well. I sure enjoyed talking to Nia. I just wanted to quickly apologize for any echoiness or just like audio issues in general. First time ever trying to do a collaborative episode, so definitely will get better the more I do. So I'm so glad that you guys decided to join me today. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at thatchristiangirl.podcast. And hopefully I'll be doing some more stuff there. And stay tuned because I have a lot of fun stuff planned for the coming weeks. A lot of school stuff to do with school. So hopefully you'll come back for those episodes, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Okay, bye! I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for listening to the end, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at thatchristiangirl.podcast. I'll see you in the next one.